To start, hi Jeremy,
What's happening?
welcome. So Zeptimus, you wanted to start with a question. Let me share my screen and the agenda.
Yeah, actually, I would like to do some kind of bias process in that question, and it's like how transparent we want to be with the addresses on the multisigs. Like, do we want just put the addresses and the names? We want to put who is who for the funds management, and yeah, like since this is like non-profit, uh, you know, we like it's public. I don't know, like yeah, like do we want names to be public or not, or we want to respect privacy of the people? Uh,
And this multi-sig that you're talking about is the laser tag or any
no,
multi-sig.
Annie, that we,
So if there's any multi-sig in the TEC, how would we want to approach transparency?
yeah, yeah. Actually, from the when because when we see like the conviction voting, I just pulling that data and putting it to Dune, but then yeah, I've been told to track also the multisigs, so I'm also have a document where I have all the names, who's who, and I don't know if that should be public, that should not be public. Yeah, and I'd like to hear from Nate first.
Hey Nate. Oh,
I can take
what
it.
about Edu? Yeah.
We were sync on that. I love so much your nickname, Jeremiah. It's so cool. I will never stop saying that. So the question. So I feel it should be kept private. Mainly kept private the names and to publicly maybe by request they could be made public, but mainly because if you're in a multisig for a working group, at least from the community's working group, it means you are the person in charge or one of the persons who it's close to the money. And I felt that that's it's a little vulnerability on putting yourself in the spotlight and saying, hey, I have this, or I have, or people will dig more into your account, and that's something I don't think is necessarily for us to link that with someone, the identity of someone, mainly because even if it's in the blockchain and we have had this discussion before that all information is there and it's for public, it's different when you pinpoint in a direction to people. It's you are linking identity with fund management to a project. So these three aspects for me can be conflictive for personal reasons for some people. I don't think it's necessary for people to know unless they request it. And they request it, we can create a form for people to request this information and then just justify why do you need to know who is the person handling that. I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
So
Durgaras has raised his hand, so I will pass it on to him.
I want to say one thing very quick, and actually, like, oh, it went out. Like, we encourage to use different addresses, like that are not linked to you. Like, we only want to be transparent regarding TC money. Like, we don't care about Edu's money or Septi's money. Like, we just care about TC money.
Oh, but that then if everyone is giving an address that is only using for TEC, I mean, I think that should be fine. But in my case, for example, in the multisig communitas, I didn't provide a new address. I provide my own address. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
that might be something we're failing. But on transparency, we are encouraging. Like, we even make a post and we're telling it weekly. Like, everyone should use different address for TC payments, because otherwise, anyone could,
Yeah.
Transparency is sending money. Oh, look, Sept and Ivy. Oh, this might be Sept. This might be Ivy. just because
Yeah.
of the tokens from the praise.
Yeah, I think we could add this to we can add this to the next tours or to the agenda of the working groups to just like make sure that everyone has created in in their multisigs different address for the multisig. I think that's a very healthy approach, Septi. So yeah, pass it on to Dulgas.
So I feel pretty strongly about all these security requirements in terms of so there are two kind of basic layers that I feel like we miss in terms of security. One is some basic sysadmin stuff, like for example, Edu, what kind of antivirus do you have on your computer? There should be some basic standards for stewards in terms of, because everyone's using their personal computers and all this stuff, but then there's this other kind of crypto security layer, which I think we also need to develop standards for that for every working group. And it's non-optional. All stewards, all people who are super admins, provisional admins, all need to have some kind of set of things. I've created a provisional set of security requirements and wrote a document about some of my initial recommendations some months ago. I don't feel like all the working groups should A, have a choice in this, B, so there should just be standards, and there should be audits by people whose job it is to actually, care about this kind of thing. So, for example, I'm a really good system administrator and could help people with setting up, basic security in a lot of different ways and make some architectural recommendations and stuff. But on the other hand, on the crypto side of it, I'm not nearly as good at that. So I feel like I'd want a little group like Griff and company who are much better at looking through the blockchain and trying to figure out what's going on there. So I do kind of feel like it when you have positions of power and you've got the TEC money in your hands, there should be some kind of standardization and security protocols and expectations, and auditing and other things that should be done. I don't think each independent working group should be making those choices. So that's just my 2 cents, and I've got some documentation to support that sort of thing. And actually, my personal story from this last week actually relates somewhat to this as well. So, there are just some other things that I'll bring up about that later, but I do feel pretty strongly that all of these basic security measures should be mandatory for people who are involved in any access to things, and there's some ideas about that. I also believe that the like for example, one of the things we're doing in the security side for comms is to set up a given email. So not only do we have control of the password manager, but also the email that is related to that password manager. So at any point, I've got the ability to shut a person's access down at a couple of different levels of abstraction. And I feel like, in some sense that we should have that. I feel it is a bit of a mistake to put your personal address on any multi-sig having to do with community money. So, but we should just have a group that gets together of sysadmins and crypto admins and tries to decide what these are and then work on them together. So that's just my feeling. So thanks.
I agree. I think if you're dealing with TEC funds and you're on a multi-sig, I'm a big fan of being public with who you are and what your address is. I think it brings accountability to everybody who's in those positions of power, who have access to it. And I think we should also catalog every multi-sig transaction and who approved each transaction. I think that those things should be very public. If people who want to have anonymity or change their wallet, I think we should go through that process immediately. But I mean, if you're on a multi-sig that's managing over, $5,000 worth of TEC tokens, you need to have your name out there. We have to have some type of reputation and accountability structure there. That's just my opinion, and
Yeah.
If you want to remain anonymous, maybe handling a multi-sig is not for you in this organization.
Yeah, and there's a way to set that up so that there's privacy on the one hand, but accountability on the other. So we can have, let's say I give out an email address of like, crypto security number 5 at teccommons.org, and so I've got an email address and I've got an associated crypto key, and we've got a database that keeps track of who was assigned that email and those management of those keys during what time. So there's accountability, but also privacy. There are ways to break those things up so that you end up with the best of both worlds. So that's part of setting up those layers of abstraction that I was talking about, so that you get everything that you need.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to turn this into a discussion just because we have more things to go through, but we can get like a first set of impressions, and then from this, I think transparency could propose a way to move forward. Zach, do you agree?
Yeah, I think I can make a poll and then a forum post.
Yeah, so we can continue to hear everyone in the room if there are different opinions. Maybe Juanca, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I am also not a security expert, and I use like my account for everything, but I feel I shouldn't. So if there are some processes that are designed, I will for sure follow them. But until now, I haven't been really cautious with that. And the other thing I wanted to share is that um, small parenthesis. After the gravity call, we will have an event. Livy and I are invited to talk about conflict management in the Gitcoin community. So yeah, everyone is invited after the gravity call. And I close my parenthesis. And I'll pass it to Jeremy.
I got nothing. Who's next?
Danny, do you want to go next?
I'm so sorry. Other than just saying, I don't have any thoughts on the topic we were talking about before. Are we just saying kind of how we're feeling and things like that?
Yeah, feel free to give a check-in if you don't have particular thoughts about the multi-sig.
Okay. I'm quite new to TEC, so I feel like it's potentially not my position to speak to it yet. Check in, feeling good, hoping that the days get longer faster, so we have more sunshine. That's it.
Thank you. Anne, do you want to go next?
Yeah, likewise. Sorry, I'm still new to the TC, trying to figure out how things work here, so I don't have anything to contribute at this point.
Do you want to just share briefly how you're arriving here today?
Oh, I'm well. Yeah, I'm not distracted. I'm looking forward to going to eat Denver this week. So, yeah.
Cool. Oh, it'll be nice to see you there. Benz, do you want to go next? So just maybe a context for people who are new in the community. I think it's not so much like how should we do things in the TEC specifically, but if you have ideas of how transparency should be dealt, especially when dealing with common funds. So we have one multi-sig in the community right now called Laser Tag that it's managing the funds of this initial buy. So when the bonding curve opened, we were the first ones to buy TC tokens. So we have a treasury of tech tokens to use in the best way possible. And then what is the best way possible? So this is what this multi-sig is executing based on the decisions of the community. So the multi-sig is not taking these decisions, it's just executing these decisions. And I think Zeptimus' question was for this multi-sig and for any other multi-sig that we happen to have in the community, if it's needed at any point, should the addresses be publicly shown, or people should have the choice of some type of privacy? And then some of the things that were shared were like, oh, if it's funds of, like, if it's communal funds, maybe we need this accountability for people's reputation to be at stake, or we need some type of security protocol, or if people want to have privacy, they should be advised to create an address just for the TEC so it doesn't compromise any of their other holdings, and things like that. Those are some of the opinions we heard so far, and I'll just pass to
Just to be clear, like the addresses are transparent, like either if we want or not, like anyone can see all the addresses that are in the multisig. What we cannot see is like these addresses linked to a name, and yeah, just that. But the addresses are already public.
Yeah, Gustavo, do you have anything to share, or you just want to say hi?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm just testing out a new layout here to join calls. Yeah, I have a question about all of these privacy issues or yeah, things that people are worried about. Like, why is it an issue, like to have somebody see your address, like if you're voting or if you're like participating? Why? I'm not sure why people have expressed that is an issue to them. Can, like, do you have like any examples of why it could become an issue, like to show like your address, or why would I want to be private on my voting or on my participation? Like, why would that be an issue?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you have $1 million and maybe someone wants come to steal you, right?
Okay, like that would be like a specific, like if somebody has a lot of money and like doesn't want people to see they have a lot of money in that address, is that the issue?
Well,
I mean, not only one, but one of.
From my perspective, every place that that people can associate me as a person with my keys is a threat vector, right? Every place.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's just universally true. Any place my email address shows up, you know, it's a threat vector. All of my different email addresses, I get dark web notifications through my security stuff saying that your email was used as a part of a hack, and so now I've got to change all of my passwords associated with that. So there's just, we're talking about a threat vector, and it is a little bit confusing to me. This seems like a place for real expertise at the levels, like in many cases, I'm feel strongly that we need like an expert working group to decide and enforce, not to vote on. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, we should vote on whether or not we should create that, maybe, but whatever comes out of that is not, I don't think, is a reasonable thing to vote on the individual, you know, things about that. So that's just my feeling. But anyway,
But
you guys
aren't
might
those
have other feelings.
like two subjects? Like one is security and one other is privacy. Like security, like,
Yep.
yeah.
And I would imagine it's the job of the expert group to make determinations like that, so you end up with the best of both of those worlds. I do that regularly as a job, my system administration job. So there are ways to architect that. I'm just saying that if we vote on a per working group basis, then we're just going to have different security standards all the way across the board, and then it'll be more difficult to audit and all these things. So, it's just, unless you have, standardization is the name of the game in IT, and we're talking about an infrastructure and security thing. So I don't know. That's just, I think it would be a mistake for us to do it some other way, but that's just my feeling.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing. And I think this is a topic that has like a lot of room for discussion. And maybe Zep, you can post this in the forum, like you said. Those are points of you can use this from what everyone shared to open the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Lily.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to move to a few other things. So we need to update the decision-making forum post. I wanted to see if someone wants to take that issue on, because I think it would be good to have it as soon as possible, but I'll be a little bit with limited availability at Denver, and maybe someone would like to take this. So this is the forum post of our governance framework, and especially on conviction voting and TAO voting. This was written when we didn't have the params still of the commons upgrade, and now we have them. So we would just need to update these two sections with the params of how long does it take to vote on conviction voting, how this conviction grows, and all of these things that were here in the voter pamphlet. So I'll attach this information here to the agenda. Would anybody be interested in taking this on?
It's just update the decision-making thread, not replying or anything, just updating, changing,
No, just
removing quadratic, so weighted voting, and then putting the params on top voting and conviction voting.
Yeah, on conviction voting and TAO voting, just putting the params. And then on snapshot, I think this is something we just need to discuss a little bit. Since quadratic voting doesn't really make sense now because anyone has access to TEC token. Unless we have an ID solution, we should just go back to the normal voting, not the quadratic one. So I don't know, should we just make a forum post to say that we're doing that, explain why it doesn't make sense using quadratic voting anymore, and that we're just going to shift snapshot to ranked choice voting and single choice voting instead of quadratic voting, and why? And
yeah, maybe if we update this forum thread, then we make a snapshot vote for the changing quadratic to weighted voting. I think I could do that today. Oh no, I'm losing connection.
Sure. Would you be cool with just like a Google Doc with the edits for that section and just share that with you, and then you can make the edits officially?
Yeah, I mean, you could do all the steps, and then I can just incorporate the edits to this, and then we just make you can even make a comment with the Google Docs. Like I want people to know that you are editing, but just so I don't know if there is I think you need to be an admin to have permission to edit other people's posts.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah, he'll need admin.
But if you could do that, it would be great. Yeah.
I said he'll need admin for that, so it may be easier just to do the Google Doc and share, and then you can edit yourself.
Yeah, I'll like comment with a Google Doc link and have the specific edits like highlighted too, so it's, you know, transparent what we're editing.
Yeah, awesome. That would be really great. Okay, so I have an issue for. Are you in our Gitbook? I mean GitHub.
I think so.
I'll add. I have an issue for this. I will change myself for you in there. Okay, so this would be for Tau voting and conviction voting, and then for snapshot. Do you guys think this is a good approach? That would just make we can make a comment in this post to say why we can't use quadratic voting anymore, and that we'll be transitioning to the other vote. I don't think this needs to be voted on. It sounds silly to vote on this. But like to just communicate that we are on hold for having another decision, like another for having an identity system that we can use.
Yeah, for transparency purposes though, it's nice to have the vote because we're dragging it there, but maybe we could also drag the forum. But I think it's harder to, you know, if you want to search for all the decisions made by the community. I mean, you know, like now because we're talking it here and we know it, but what about people who's not in this call and, you know, maybe they just don't check on a comment on the forum, and it seems like a big change of the governance. Yeah, maybe.
I don't think it's that big of a change. Like I think that most people aren't going to be impacted because they don't have access to quadratic voting. Now, if somebody wants to use quadratic voting for a specific purpose, maybe information gathering or signaling of some kind, like that's cool. But I just don't see why anybody would really care. I think that's kind of like a group decision in terms of like which ones we use for certain types of votes, but stating that we're not going to use quadratic voting, I don't think is that big of an issue. I could be wrong, but you know, that's why we're talking about it now. But so if you guys, anybody has an issue with it, I would say speak now, but I don't know if we need a vote for it.
Also, what you said, Zeptimus, makes me think that we should have some type of decision tracking for advice process decisions. You know, because there are a lot of decisions that happen just on working groups, and that's something we promote actually with our decision-making process, that like not every decision needs to be voted on. And maybe if we start tracking some of the decisions, I know it's hard to track, but if to the best of our ability, if we start tracking decisions that come from advice process, we would have some data on that, and then we would be able to like see the validity of it later. Like maybe for something that was decided just on advice process, and then there was some type of issue with that in the future, and then we see like, oh, this is an indicator that maybe this type of decision needs voting in the future.
Yeah, there's actually one point in the audit for all these, decisions. But for example, for this one, I just type it here in the agenda for transparency, so we can talk on it. But the thing is, like, if we don't have a clear structure, then it sometimes can be harder. Or what if I miss a call and then I don't see it, or will someone post it somewhere? So yeah, like I can miss stuff, and I think transparency shouldn't rely on individuals, but on processes. But yeah, definitely there is a point on the audit for decisions and processes that are being taken by the community, and not only the ones that are being voted.
The question that comes up for me is where might be an appropriate place, just as a first pass prototype, wet finger work. Where would be the good place to store those decisions and the decision-making criteria? Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know what sort of protocols we're using. What methodology did we look at? If we were using liberating structures, did we use a TRIZ thing? Do we use, I mean, a lot of this thing that we call advice process could just be, there are multiple aspects from liberating structures that could help, improv prototyping, what I need from you. I mean, there's just a bunch of different aspects. What about, making sure we understand the Cynefin thing? Are we creating an enabling constraint or a governing constraint? I mean, there are a whole bunch of decision-making things that I'd like to kind of know about in terms of this. So, just from a protocol standpoint, not only what the decision was, but what was the process we used to kind of get to that, so that things that are successful, we can say, oh yeah, it was really successful using this social network webbing, thing from whatever, I mean, anyway, that's my thought too.
Yeah, my thinking on that sense is that the most intuitive, the better. Like the more, like I think there's a lot of value on certain frameworks and processes, but I think the less we use. Like the less people need to learn to participate in a process, and the more they can relate with it or participate in it in a way that is somehow spontaneous. I think it's interesting. I like of this concept of quality consent, of like if we are that we can first see if everyone understands what's being proposed, and then this is like the first is there questions about this, and then after if the questions are solved, or if there was no questions, is this something we can move on with? Is there any blockers? And then if there is any blockers, like understanding the risk of these blockers, and if this is something that creates a very poor consent, like if there is not like let's say we're discussing about this in this group and there are many divergent opinions, then maybe it's something we need to escalate to hearing more people and to bringing to the community advice process, bringing to the forum. And if that is not enough, then we find out that that's a very big issue and that many people have opinions about it and that there is engagement. And then this engagement brings to a voting process, like a cultural vote. I don't know. What do you think about this, Durgadas?
Well, I mean, yeah, I hear you saying two different things. Number one is the less people need to know to participate. I actually think that that's kind of a mistake, and that's a structural mistake because I feel like part of the thing about working in this space is that we have to accept that people are coming with this, and I say this a lot in different groups, people are coming with their legacy code base idea, right? But then there's this decentralized thing we're trying to do here, and there's just numerous blind spots, and we've talked about racism and sexism and transphobia and all these things that exist in this space too. And I feel like there are these all of those are products of outsourcing our sense making and our ability to be inclusive. You have to have educational processes that kind of are in the middle. So I guess the question is, are we trying to include as many people as possible, or are we trying to get things done? And so like there's just all this so that's why I was saying, suggesting something in the middle, like a liberating structures concept. Or it's also true that just poorly constructed narratives can create a whole bunch of confusion for people. So if we do a poor job at constructing the narrative about a particular proposal and somebody else does a great job, the proposal may be less valid, but the narrative is constructed better. So so you end up with a successful proposal that's worse than the alternative, just because the narrative is constructed differently. So I mean, there are just numerous issues here, and when we're talking about SoftGov, I feel like plus I've just got all this stuff to like bring up in this meeting that I'm pregnant with, all of which has to do with the structural stuff that I've observed in multiple contexts here. So I'm not sure where to lay all that down, but I feel like we really need to think quite strongly about how we are conducting ourselves. And so I don't know.
Does anyone has something to share?
Yeah, this is something that I have been thinking these past weeks, and is that we have been doing a very good job on the onboarding journey to our processes and to the culture that we want to bring, but that we should only also try to add some technical focus to some of our onboarding calls, because we like there's new people coming and there are different backgrounds and familiarity to Web3, and like this is a very big and broad space. So we can also provide that technical first steps to Web3 to the people that is non-native to the space within our onboarding journey.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think maybe the conversation got a little bit mixed on like, and maybe all this has to do somehow with governance. I think maybe a big part of maybe something that we might be missing is how to make people feel like they have a voice on the decisions that can be made, like on the proposals, right? And this has been coming to my attention that maybe people are not so comfortable with the idea of duocracy, and that we could open the space more and talk more about this agency, that that it would be really great that every member feels like they have the agency to propose solutions to problems that they see, and to share these problems in a working group environment, or directly in the forum, or with individuals, and that this can spark conversations. So I don't know actually if many people have read the decision-making framework, because I would love if there was some reactions to the advice process, how it's laid out there, and if that's not working, then how can we improve that? So here there's all of these parts of, like, first step to any advice process is the first step to any decision, and that you can read more about advice process, and like what is this here, and then that we divide it into 3 sections of small impact decisions, medium impact decisions, and large impact decisions. And here I just try to create a boundary for when each one of these are used. So when to use small impact decisions, when you ask a subject matter expert, when you ask just one person or a couple of people. So during workflows, when questions arise or guidance is needed, and when to use medium impact decision, when the advice needed is related to a work stream for a particular working group, when to use the large impact in case the number of people who could offer meaningful feedback or be affected by the proposal is the entire community, or is a number that is too large to address one by one. And then there are some examples of how to approach, why are they useful. I would love some direct feedback on these points, and if this doesn't seem like it's gonna work, how could we improve it? So like you're suggesting, Durgadas, like maybe we could use another type of framework, but then how would it be the onboarding? Like what I said, that I think it's important to be intuitive is exactly for being inclusive, and for people to have like a quick access to decision making. But if there is a better approach, I think we should totally propose it and change it, and see how the community adapts to it. So yeah, I would just love to have a direct feedback on this, and propose solutions, and then we can continue to discuss.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
As an anthropologist, I'm wondering, like, based on your experiences and, like, you've been here for a while, what has been the biggest challenge or obstacle to participation and, like, people initiating that sense of agency?
I can partially answer that if you feel you have time to think. I think one of the blockers that we found along the way, it's people not having the pathway very clear for them. So they could have an idea or they want to propose something, but they don't know what will be the steps to do so. So basically, accessibility to information and clarification on the process has been a blocker in clarification of expectations. I think people don't know what are the expectations, or what do they expect from us, and vice versa. So documentation and expectations are, for me, the 2 things that has been the bigger blockers. I don't know. How about you, Libby?
Yeah, go ahead, Durgadas.
So the situation that happened with me, I think, highlights the problems that I have with the process that we were just talking about here. So, situation that happened to me was basically the most prominent member in this entire community. Kind of made a judgment call about a certain thing, and that was not surfaced despite the existence of transparency and a whole bunch of people that I have a long relationship with. And so there's numerous problems here. So we've got we've got bystanders, So I had this conversation with Nate yesterday where he knew about it for a long time and probably many other people did. And they were all like, well, I thought gravity was dealing with it or this and that. And so everyone's a bystander. So here I am suffering from a thing that I don't even know about that is in direct opposition with all of my stated involvement and literally my entire, involvement in this community. And so really, it's just a thing where one person with a giant amount of power and a bunch of bystanders, So what I'm seeing is that the peer-to-peer advice process can override all of the other processes, and the working group process can override, the impact for a large number of people, and vice versa. So, so what we end up with here is not a DAO, but a semi-centralized bureaucracy instead of a DAO, right? So are we measuring how decentralized we are, in terms of, so when we're making decisions, how are we measuring that, right? So there are certain decisions like I'm going to recommend that expertise needs to be involved. But at the same time, we should be letting people know that that's what's needed here and what the decisions and the results are. That's a basic part of transparency. When I talked to the transparency group about my situation, they were talking extremely passively. And for me, the transparency group is very much like a free press in a democracy. You have to have an active, almost combative group of transparency, people who are working in this situation. And so, so here I am, more than a year went by where I was suffering under this unknown thing. And so I just see that there are some structural issues where anybody in the working groups, the stewards are overly rewarded in comparison to subject matter experts or other people who are supporting them. I mean, there are numerous sort of structural problems that I'm observing. I just see that we largely ignore this stuff when it doesn't suit us. All of these structures, So. And what we do is we instead choose the previous centralized hierarchical, and we unconsciously give up our power and outsource, our responsibility for things to other people that are higher in the perceived hierarchy, rather than acting like a DAO. And it's bothersome to me because I think it's structurally, having an impact here. So even now, Wonka's mailing me saying, "Hey, maybe this isn't the place for that." But if this isn't the place for it, I don't know where is the place for it. It's just in even with voting, it's like, hey, let's vote on everything. Well, if we roll up all the votes into 5 different sections, all of which have very different kinds of things, then we're doing the same exact thing as we're doing in Congress with giant omnibus bills. So they're just. I'd just like to surface the fact that I think we're not conducting ourselves in the kind of way that we're telling ourselves we're conducting ourselves. And I'm a little emotional about it and a little bit strong feeling about it. But I apologize for taking up all that space. But I just feel like maybe there's some things we need to look at. So I'll talk in the Stewards channel about this too. But I don't know. I just feel strongly that if somebody like me, who's as prominent in this group, can run into these kinds of issues, what's happening to other people who aren't? Do you know what I mean? Are we leaving them, by the wayside? And that's why I'm sort of suggesting that we put in other structural things like liberating structures that actively subvert the potential for this type of thing to happen. And so that's kind of my perspective on dealing with all of these things in terms of, voting is just not enough. There are a lot of ways you can break voting, and doing omnibus things is one way to do that. There's ways to break participation and working groups and all these things, and we're kind of falling for a bunch of them in the exact same way that many of the things that we're trying to construct our way out of have already done. So anyway, I'm just I'll stop there. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Durgadas. Hi, Katie. Very, very nice to see you here.
Hi. Thank you, Durgadas. That was amazing, Durgadas. Wow, what a moment to join the party. Holy smokes.
Yeah, sorry to hit you with that.
Hello,
I hear you loud
Katie.
and clear.
Welcome
Hi.
back, Suga.
Thanks, everybody. I missed y'all.
Yeah, I just want to offer a quick introduction into the subject that Durgadas is speaking of, if that's okay, Durgadas, for everyone in the call that doesn't know.
Yeah, I just want people to know about it.
Yeah, so there was an issue with Durgadas Trusted Seed application. So to be a part of the TC hatch, you had to be a part of the Trusted Seed. And the Trusted Seed is part of the Common Stack project. And to be a part of the Trusted Seed, you need to fulfill an application. And in this application, you're basically showing that you're a value-aligned person that is trusted to start new economies. So the TEC was this new economy that was about to start, and we chose the Trusted Seed as the strategy to initialize this this economy. And more than a year ago, when Durgadas applied to the Trusted Seed, when his information was being validated by, like, this is done manually by the team, by the Common Stack team, Griff saw that there was something like a weird activity attached to Durgadas' address, and he flagged his application, just in the sense of like, this has a low score in the Trusted Seed. And there are many types of scores, and there's the max score that you can have. And then this course, it's basically a reputation type of mechanism. And when his membership, when his address was flagged, this wasn't communicated to him. And this was probably the biggest mistake, that Durgadas wasn't aware that his address was flagged. And then this inhibited his participation in the community somehow, because we have a whole process for credentials management. So some people can, like, we have votes to allow people to be to receive certain credentials for certain platforms. And there was this instance that Durgadas wanted to have credentials to manage HubSpot, and that credential was denied. And then this came up, and then I got to his knowledge that more than just the Trusted Seed team knew about this, that more people knew about this information. And then I just raised the issue that we need to be very careful with privacy, transparency, how we share people's personal information, and how we communicate this to Trusted Seed members or to anyone in the community. So yeah, this was a very unfortunate issue. And of course, it affected Durgadas' feelings of belonging in this community and of trust with the transparency processes that we have. And yeah, I want to acknowledge that you're feeling this way, and that there are probably many things that we need to change on how these things are addressed. And I think culture is a living entity, and I think anytime there is someone that has done wrong, or there is any type of mistake in the process, I think it's important to assume best intentions, and that there is always ways that we can improve. And I think we totally need to look at this in a way of like how to grab the learnings from this. And one of the learnings might be exactly what you're saying, of like our peer-to-peer advice overriding the overriding all types of advice process, and how are this information that are being shared in private are affecting the community and are affecting people. But this is only something that we can change on a personal level, and I think that's why it's important to have these conversations, to have communities working groups, Softgov, transparency, to everyone talking about this gravity, just for us to find ways to improve. But I don't think that this shows a problem in the whole process and structure. I think this signals how behavior in front of these processes are important and how we're dealing with them.
Yeah, I agree. And I talked with Durgadas about this because I was notified, and it's one of those individual things where it's I should have said something. I should have done something when I first heard about it. And traditionally, you get in that situation and you think of, how you deal with this in other situations. And so it's, I went back to my standard, working in a centralized job forever. Like, okay, you have the power, you guys know what's going on, and I'll leave it alone. And so I become a bystander in that process when I really should have taken action. And these are some things that we just have to learn about as individuals and to address it. There's a lot of education, self-education that we all need to go through in terms of these types of situations. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Word. Learning in real life sucks, right? It's painful. And that sounds like a painful experience for Durgadas. So, I mean, and we're all still here. So, maybe a tad bit of normalization at the same time. And I really appreciate, Nate, that sentiment of wanting to learn from the sort of owness. Anybody else?